You know what is truly fascinating? This Sunday, while 115 million people are screaming at their televisions, pounding tables in pure ecstasy or absolute despair, there is an entire shadow population out there who genuinely could not care less. And I am not talking about people pretending not to care just for attention. I mean the folks who watch the Super Bowl hype with the exact same emotional neutrality as if they were watching a competitive butter sculpting tournament. Just complete, utter emptiness. Here is what people misunderstand. They are not trying to act superior or edgy. For them, the event simply does not register in their minds. The truth is, caring about sports is not some default human setting. Your brain does not pop out of the womb pre-programmed to lose its mind over a touchdown. So, what is actually happening in the minds of those who are completely obsessed? It all comes down to a tangled web of tribal identity and a fascinating psychological concept known as basking in reflected glory. Think about it. Fans feel an intense, personal connection to the players on the field, even though they absolutely do not know them. When their chosen team scores, their brains release a massive hit of dopamine, the exact same reward chemical you get when you achieve something great. But here is the catch. The fan did literally nothing. They just existed on a couch, wearing the right colors, in the correct zip code. For the people who do not care about the game, watching this happen is a bizarre experience. It is as if that specific dopamine switch in their brain is simply disconnected. They watch grown adults crying or screaming over a piece of leather crossing a painted line, and they feel nothing but pure bewilderment. They look at the chaos, shrug, and think, well, I guess that particular trigger just does not land the same way for me. But why does that switch work for some and not for others? It comes down to a concept in psychology called your optimal level of stimulation. Think about the actual game of football itself. It is 3 hours of organized chaos. You have explosive momentum shifts, last-minute interceptions, and heart-stopping reversals of fortune. Some brains absolutely crave that level of extreme volatility. They need those massive emotional spikes to feel fully engaged and alive. But human nervous systems are not all built the same way. For a significant portion of the population, that constant emotional whiplash is not entertaining at all. It is genuinely exhausting. When the score flips back and forth, their brains do not register excitement. They register stress and emotional drain. These individuals operate on a completely different frequency. They naturally prioritize internal stability and prefer experiences that offer a steady, predictable flow of energy, rather than an intense roller coaster ride that completely depletes their emotional reserves. Now, you might think that by avoiding this massive cultural event, these people are somehow antisocial or lack a sense of community, but that is completely false. It is true that sports tap directly into our deepest evolutionary survival instincts. The whole us versus them dynamic is a primal urge that kept our ancestors alive by forming strong, fiercely loyal tribes. However, the people opting out of the Super Bowl still possess that exact same human need for connection. Their brains simply fulfill it elsewhere. They have just found their tribes in different corners of the world. Maybe it is a deeply passionate online forum about custom mechanical keyboards. Perhaps it is a dedicated local book club. They still crave that powerful feeling of belonging. They just do not require a manufactured rivalry on a grass field to feel it. And crucially, they do not need to memorize a quarterback's passing statistics to prove they are a worthy member of a collective. There is another fascinating layer to this disconnect, rooted deeply in how we view our own influence on the world. Psychologists call it the locus of control. Think about what it means to be a dedicated sports fan. You are sitting on a couch, screaming at a screen, wearing a lucky jersey, fully surrendering your emotional state to external events. You are entirely comfortable investing massive amounts of joy and sorrow into an outcome that you literally cannot change. But for the person who feels nothing during the Super Bowl, this behavior can feel deeply irrational. These individuals often operate with a strong internal locus of control. For them, pouring intense emotional energy into a situation where they are merely a powerless spectator feels completely meaningless. They are not the audience. They want to be the director. They would much rather reserve their passion, their frustration, and their triumphs for things where their own actual effort directly dictates the final result. Beyond the psychology of control, we absolutely must talk about the physical environment. Let us be honest. Modern life is already a relentless barrage of stimulation. Every single day, we are bombarded by a never-ending stream of text messages, looming deadlines, and constant digital noise. Our mental bandwidth is already maxed out. So, when the Super Bowl rolls around, for many, it is not a much-needed escape. It is simply another massive energy thief trying to steal whatever tiny fraction of peace they have left. This is especially true for a specific group. Psychologists estimate that roughly 1/5 of the population are considered highly sensitive people. This is entirely different from the emotional drain of the game's changing scores that we discussed earlier. This is about the physical reality of attending a Super Bowl party. For a highly sensitive person, walking into that living room is not a celebration. It is a full-scale sensory assault. The chaotic flashing lights from the giant television, the sudden, deafening screams erupting from the couch, the overlapping loud chatter of a dozen different conversations happening all at once. To them, this is not a fun, relaxing Sunday. It is a grueling endurance test that will leave their nervous system completely shattered for days. But let us imagine you take away the loud party. Let us say they are just watching the game alone, in a perfectly quiet room. For some, the core mechanics of the game are still deeply problematic. This brings us to a psychological trait known as the intolerance of uncertainty. The entire appeal of live sports is built entirely on the unknown. You have absolutely no idea who is going to win until the final seconds. For millions of fans, that suspense is thrilling. But if your brain has a low threshold for unpredictability, that exact same suspense does not feel like entertainment. It feels like voluntary anxiety. Why would anyone willingly subject themselves to 3 hours of manufactured tension, especially for an outcome that has zero impact on their actual, real-world life? For these individuals, watching the Super Bowl is not a fun mystery unfolding. It is just 3 agonizing hours of stress with no meaningful payoff. They are not enjoying the ride. They are simply waiting for the discomfort to be over. And if the unpredictability of the game itself is not exhausting enough, the massive cultural circus surrounding the event will absolutely finish the job. The Super Bowl is no longer just a football game. It is a mandatory pop culture exam. Even if you do not care about the score, there is an immense, unspoken social pressure to actively participate in the spectacle. You are expected to have strong opinions about the multi-million-dollar commercials. You are supposed to debate the halftime show choreography. You even have to enthusiastically praise the themed snacks. It creates this deeply uncomfortable situation where you are constantly forced to pretend. You sit there, forcing a smile, acting like you are deeply invested in a cultural moment that means absolutely nothing to you. It feels entirely fake. And honestly, it is an incredibly isolating experience. You can be standing right in the very center of a crowded, cheering room, surrounded by celebrating friends, and still feel completely and utterly alone. We have spent all this time analyzing the nervous system, sensory overload, and deep-seated social pressures. But let us take a massive step back and be completely real for a moment. Sometimes, there is absolutely no profound psychological theory behind it. Sometimes, people just do not like the sport of football. That is the entire explanation. Think about it. It is exactly the same as how some people physically cannot stomach the taste of cilantro, or how someone else might instantly leave a room if you put on heavy techno music. It is just a harmless, personal preference. Yet, we live in a culture that feels the need to pathologize every single difference. It is actually completely bizarre that society demands a scientific or medical justification just because you do not enjoy watching grown men tackle each other. Nobody asks for a psychological evaluation when you say you dislike a certain vegetable. So why on earth do we demand one for a football game? So why do people get so incredibly defensive, sometimes even genuinely angry, when you simply state that you do not care about the Super Bowl? To understand this, we have to look at the fans. For millions of people, this event is not just weekend entertainment. It is a fundamental pillar of their identity. It is their tribe, their history, and their shared language. When you casually dismiss the game, their brain subconsciously translates that as a direct, personal rejection of them and their entire community. They do not hear that you dislike football. They hear that you are rejecting their values. So, whether your nervous system cannot handle the sensory overload, or your locus of control rejects the unpredictability, or you simply just do not like the sport, your stance is completely valid. And if you are a fan who lives and breathes every single play, that is just as valid. The absolute best part of our society is that 115 million people can scream their lungs out over a football, while millions of others can just peacefully and happily go to sleep early. And somehow, the world keeps spinning. If this psychological deep dive resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.